Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Institute of Managers and Leaders. It's terrific you're joining us here today to join us with our webinar on results-based communication, the 5 communication strategies every leader should use. Shortly, I'll welcome Jackie Perkins into my seat to take over and deliver a really insightful and thoughtful presentation built around the content that we've developed with our Intentional Leadership series. I'm going to take a minute to talk to you about the Institute, and then we'll cover off on some of the key factors around our Foundations program before we move into the content on communication. So since 1941, the Institute has been delivering leadership solutions. These days, we deliver leadership programs directly into organisations and to individuals. We provide that with supported people analytics tools, communication strategies on, working with companies to get communication strategies, coaching and mentoring, and customised solutions for organisations. The Institute is very proud of its history, and we have delivered these leadership solutions for a long, long time. Just a little bit about the webinar and where we're going to get to. So in terms of timing, Jackie's going to speak for about 35 minutes. And as I said, I'm going to invite her to come on shortly. The availability of materials, they'll be available at the end of the webinar. Simply request it through our program's email, and I'll go a little bit into that at the end. And also questions, please share your questions throughout the webinar, and we will get to them at the end. And I hope that we can get through as many as we can. We've got a very large audience today. So I hope to get through as many as we can. If we don't, we'll certainly share them. We'll certainly reply to you after the session through our program's email. A little bit about our Foundations program just quickly. In 2007, we met with organisations right across Australia to understand a little bit about the challenges they faced in developing their managers and leaders. We recognised that the skills that were being taught from accredited programs were not necessarily the skills that we thought were being effective in the workplace, and the outcomes weren't as effective for the organisations and indeed the individuals. So this led us to create the Foundations program, a very practical program designed to transform the accidental manager to the intentional leader. We worked very hard with organisations in developing it. We brought together L&D specialists, and we brought together a range of experts to look at a program that was certainly practically based, workplace based, and that delivered the right solution, the right outcome for organisations. So what did we come up with? We came up with a 12-week development program, and the basis behind that is that we believe to change people's behaviour and to change how they operate as a manager and leader and develop the skills need to be reinforced over a period of time. The minimum amount of time we discovered was around 12 weeks. We include 3 diagnostic reports. That's one of our own diagnostic tools at IML's IP, called the IML 360. We look at emotional intelligence through a 360, and we also look at a self-rater on a personality survey. So we use 3 diagnostic tools up front. It's 6 full days of facilitated learning, so 1 session every fortnight. It includes coaching, which once again is a very, very effective medium which we felt was being missed by accredited courses in the market. We include a 4-month mentor as part of it through our professional membership network. It includes a professional membership to the Institute, and it also includes access to our learning management system, our LMS, with 8,000 e-learning courses, but also, most importantly, our own learning materials for the Foundations program. As part of the program, we look at a workplace project and presentation that everyone goes through. So what it's designed to do is be very, very applied, and humans learn by repetition. So what we want to do is try to reinforce the learning that they're taking away from the program and reinforce that back into their workplace through a project and presentation. The difference that we believe this has compared to accredited programs or accredited courses is that it brings people together from a range of industries and different perspectives in a maximum cohort of 16. So most of the learning is actually peer learning. So the facilitator facilitates discussion, but really the learning and the key differentiation is that that peer group learns from each other and understands that probably what they're feeling is not indifferent to other people in different industries, and it's about the way you approach it. We also provide attendees with the opportunity to apply their learning, as I said, into the workplace. It's very, very important to be able to take that back. I will share with you in a minute the line manager. I will share with you in a little bit the line manager and how we have the line manager's support throughout the program. And each workplace learning project is tailored to the individual. So what we try to do is obviously make it as individual as possible through a peer learning experience. And what we've seen is some terrific results, which I'll share shortly. The embedded learning as well from our Chartered Manager program is absolutely essential. The Chartered Manager is built around self-reflection. And we require individuals throughout the process to self-reflect on what they're doing. Are there areas they can improve on? Are the things that they're doing in their workplace effective and creating productivity? And that is absolutely central to the Foundations program. The key difference of our program compared to others, we believe, is certainly the return on the investment. And we've made it a priority to be able to measure that for organisations. What I'm showing you here is amongst our manage and lead competencies, which I will show you the framework in a minute, the return on investment is certainly stark. We can see that line managers, the feedback from line managers, and this is feedback from before and after from line managers, is that there's certainly improvements right across each of the competencies that we've measured. So bringing that in a little bit closer, 28% increase across creative and innovative thinking, decision making and problem solving. We can prove a 16% increase. Business acumen, 13%. Manage time and priorities, 13%. Communicate effectively, 10%. So I guess what we're trying to demonstrate is that we have measured the line managers both before and after for a participant who's come through our program, and there's been a stark increase across the board, which tells us that what we're doing is trying to create a really practical environment where they're taking these skills back into the workplace. And the development program, as I said, is totally targeted towards offering a practical opportunity for people to come in, learn, and take that back to their workplace and share it. Alongside that is the coaching and the mentoring that supports them on that journey, as well as the self-awareness pieces from the diagnostic tools. So we're very confident that what we're delivering is having a real impact in workplaces and having a real impact on the individuals that are doing the program. By demand from organisations, they stress to us that they would love the program to be shared more broadly, particularly the content. And Jackie's about to go into some of the content around our communications essentials module. But what we've done is we've broken up some of the content into 7 different workshops that we can now supply into organisations. So this is for up to 20 individuals in employer groups, and we can cover off these topics. And this is, as I said, by demand. Organisations have said, we really want to take what you've done in that module and present that to my team, or present it to my broader workplace. So these are available upon request, as I said, and we will share some of that information at the end about how to discuss with our corporate solutions team a little bit more about these workshops. Everything at IML, as I said, is centered around our framework. You can see on the left there's the managed self competencies. These are really the target for our Foundations program, and particularly the information that Jackie will talk about in a minute. The communicate effectively is the third one down in managed self. That's certainly a priority for today, but communication constantly comes up from employer groups about where managers and leaders are slipping down, particularly in a day and age where the workplace is fragmented, and particularly in a day and age where technology plays such a big role. So communication is a really important aspect of that managed self competencies. We also have the Accelerate program, which is targeted towards middle managers, and that program is focused on manage and lead others competencies there on the right hand side, you can see. what we're talking about today is really centered around those managed self-competencies, particularly communication. And as I said, I'm delighted to welcome Jackie Perkins here today, because Jackie's our Queensland-based facilitator for our Foundations program. Jackie also does a number of the workshops that I mentioned previously for employers. And Jackie has a huge amount of experience in this space. I was going to read her bio, but I didn't want to embarrass her before bringing her on. But she's got vast experience in facilitating programs and coaching individuals and getting the best out of people. And we're delighted that Jackie is our Queensland facilitator, because we know she's the best. And I'm sure you'll agree with that after today's session. Jackie, as I said, has been with us for a number of years and has been really our foundation facilitator for the program. She's the one and only facilitator here in Queensland for us, and as I said, brings her passion, brings her knowledge, and really drives that practical experience for all the learning occasions. So without further ado, I hope I've given a little bit of an introduction into the Foundations program and where today's content is derived from. I'll come back in for the Q&A at the end, but I'll hand over to Jackie now, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Sam, for those really, really kind words. I hope I live up to your expectations and to everyone else's expectations. So you'll see on the screen, I've written a message: communication means common understanding. So communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means common understanding. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is to actually set a framework for where we're going to from here. When we want to communicate with someone, we might be thinking, oh, I need to be motivational, I need to be inspiring, I need to be succinct, I need to be articulate, I need to have an awesome vocabulary. Essentially, the only thing we really should be focused on is, have I achieved common understanding? Has the other party or parties walked away with the same understanding that I intended them to walk away with? Both content in terms of the situation as well as my intention. Is there a common understanding around my intention? So that sets us up to go into the 5 strategies around actually achieving this common understanding. And our first strategy, sorry, I just need to clear my throat. The first strategy is asking yourself, what do I want to achieve by the end of this communication? So if you're anything like me, sometimes we start off with, oh, I need to say this, and I need to do this, and I need to say that, and I need to make sure I include this. But we don't stop and go, well, what do I actually want to have on the table by the end of this conversation? What would that look like if I was successful? What would people be doing or thinking if I actually achieved what I wanted to achieve? So let's just make sure we start with that question. What do I want to achieve by the end of this communication before we start writing content as to what you're actually going to say? So some things you might want to ask yourself are, my objective is to perhaps just understand another perspective. Maybe my objective is actually to solve a problem. By the end of this discussion, I need a solution. Or maybe my objective is to actually get commitment or buy into my idea. So I don't actually need to implement it or action plan it right now, but I just need to get people's support at this point. Or maybe my objective is simply to build a relationship or repair a relationship, maybe to gain credibility, get trust with someone that's maybe a little bit not sure who I am and whether they want to work with me or not. Or maybe I just simply want to delegate a task or a project. I might need to go and resolve a conflict, or the really, really stressful one, I might need to address poor performance. And I think we can all agree that every single one of those objectives would require a completely different approach. So before you just start jumping in there and writing down everything you need to do and say, stop and go, what do I want on the table by the end of this communication? What is my objective? What do I want to achieve? Then develop your strategy, and very importantly say, is my strategy going to deliver this objective? And if it isn't, go back and rewrite what you've written. So strategy number 2, ask yourself, what's in it for the other party? The Whiffen factor. What's in it for me? often we think, this is what I want to get out of it. This is what I want to achieve. This is what's important to me. This is why I want to have this conversation. And we don't pause to go, well, why the hell should they be interested? What do they want to get out of this? Why would this be beneficial to them? And if we don't do that, we immediately actually lose the enthusiasm and their energy to actually partake in that conversation. So stop before you actually start communicating anything and go, what is that person's Whiffen factor? What's important to them? Is it results? Is it relationships? Is it solutions? Is it information? What do they stand to gain by having this conversation with me? What do they want to gain by having this conversation? So let's think about some things they may want. Will they see my approach as helpful or harmful? Will they see my approach as productive or unproductive? Will they see it as motivating or distressing? Would they see it as empowering or perhaps prescriptive? Bottom line, will they walk away better off or worse off as a result of this conversation? And if you're not sure about the answers to those questions, actually go run it by someone else. Take it to someone you trust. Take it to your manager, your mentor, someone in another team and say, if I approach this meeting, this conversation, if I send this email, would it actually come across as helpful or harmful, as productive or unproductive? So even a conversation around poor performance, someone can walk away and say, that was a helpful conversation. I actually got a lot out of that. I actually have a really good action plan. I'm glad we had that conversation. Strategy number 3. Ask yourself, is my communication style working for me? So if you were to go to China on business, would it help you if you could speak Mandarin? Yeah, obviously it would. Now it's the same thing. We might all be speaking English, but are we actually communicating in a style that works for that person or that team member or that group of people? So potentially, am I communicating details when that person simply just wants the big picture? Or am I communicating background and context and the person's going, for God's sake, could you get on with it? I just want the bottom line, you're wasting my time. Or maybe am I communicating straight to outcomes and results? And this person is saying, hey, hang on a second. I need some processes here. I need some plans here. I can't just talk about outcomes without some actual simple steps on how to get there. Or maybe you talking gut, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is my intuition, and this person is saying, I'm not buying into any of this. I don't have an appetite for this. I just want the facts. What are the facts? What are the figures? So you may or may not be familiar with the DISC personality profile. This is something that you can do through IML. It's one of the diagnostic tools that is used in the foundation of intentional leadership. So what I talk about is when we look at the 4 stars within DISC, I actually talk about 4 different birds because it's so much easier to remember an eagle, a peacock, a dove, an owl, rather than DISC. You can really actually visualize that bird in your mind. So if you're talking to an eagle, which is the D, this person wants results. This person wants to know how they can actually have autonomy in this situation. This person wants to know outcomes. So how am I going to communicate in a way that this eagle goes, yep, you're talking my language. I'm interested in this conversation. Or if I'm talking to a peacock, they're saying, I want the big picture. I actually want to know how this is going to improve my visibility, my profile. I want to know how this is going to give me recognition. Or if I'm talking to a dove, they're wanting to know, well, how does this impact the team? How does this build morale? How does this actually make people feel included? Or if I'm talking to an owl, they're interested in, well, how is that actually going to be predictable? How is it going to deliver accuracy? What are the processes? How are we going to measure this? So am I actually using a style of communication that is going to resonate with that particular bird type? And if you've got a group of people, you need to be hitting all 4. So a great little resource is a YouTube clip which is included in your resources. So once you get hold of programs at IML, they will send you all the resources that come out with this PowerPoint slideshow. And this is a great little YouTube clip which really gives you some beautiful insight into those 4 different birds, how you recognize what bird you're talking to, and then how you can adapt your language to actually talk. If you're talking to an eagle, talk eagle language. If you're talking to a dove, talk dove language. So moving on from that, let's have a look at our strategy 4. Now, I can't see you and I can't hear you, so I would love it if you could just potentially text through a thumbs up, or yes, I can hear you, yes, you're making sense, or actually not making sense, struggling to hear you, or whatever it is. Just give me some idea of how you're traveling on the other side there, and I can then get some indication of potentially how I might need to adapt the way I'm communicating to you right now. So let's have a look at strategy 4. I've put a question there. Will my communication trigger a threat or opportunity response? Now, you might be sitting there thinking, what the hell is she talking about? So let me share this with you. You may or may not have come across the work of a wonderful man by the name of Dr. David Rock, who has invented the SCARF model. And he talks about every single one of us having 5 intrinsic domains that influence us to receive information as either helpful or harmful. So I've used a little analogy there. The SCARF model can help us to minimize perceived threats or maximize collaborative feelings generated through reward when communicating with others. So what on earth does this mean? So very simply, I want you to picture that all information you receive is going through your emotional brain first. So just visually, just think about your emotional brain is at the back of your head, just above the neck. That's just a simple way to go, okay, there's my emotional brain. Your rational brain is at the top of your head towards your forehead. That's your prefrontal cortex. Now, I want you to visualize this communication entering through your emotional brain first and then engaging the rational brain, which means that anything and everything we receive, we process through the emotional filter first. And it's at that juncture that the emotional brain goes, this is helpful to me, or this is harmful to me. This is an opportunity to me, or this is a threat to me. And if it triggers a threat response, the rational brain disengages. And what we then trigger is an emotional, irrational response. Or I sometimes refer to it as people going into silence, disengaging, or going into violence. They start getting angry and confrontational. So before I start to communicate with anyone, I want to think about my delivery. Is my delivery going to trigger a threat or an opportunity response? So the SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So what does that actually mean? Every single one of us has a need for these 5 things. Sorry, I'm just going to clear my throat. Now, in the resources that will be sent to you on your request, there's an opportunity to do a 360-degree SCARF self-assessment. And that will then let you know where you lie with these 5 SCARF needs. Some of us might have a very high need for status and a very low need for fairness. But once you understand where your SCARF needs are, you'll get magnificent insight into why you have a threat response to certain situations, why potentially you go into silence or violence in certain situations. And also, it would be great if you could get your team to do the self-assessment, because you'll understand why members in your team or your organization potentially react by going into silence or violence when one of their SCARF needs are not met. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the example of a change situation, because that actually triggers a potential threat response against all 5 of those SCARF needs. So if I have a high need for status, that means I really need to feel significant. I need to feel relevant and competent. So if you're now going to introduce a major change, I might be saying, well, am I still going to be, the queen bee in this team? Am I still going to have the same status in this team? Will I still be able to do the job that I'm good at? Will people see me as competent? And if I think that's been challenged, then my need for status is challenged, and I might react adversely to it. Or let's say when I introduce a change, my need is for certainty. And if you deliver that message in a way that's not predictable, there's no reassurance or guarantees about what the outcome is going to look like, that could trigger a threat response in me where I go, I'm not certain about how this is going to play out. I'm feeling actually really unsafe here at the moment. And this is where we might see people going into silence, disengagement, or violence, complaining and moaning about the change. Or let's say your particular need is for autonomy. So autonomy is your need for input, your need for self-determination, to be heard, to have a choice. Now, let's say the organization just says, this is the change, we're rolling out a change without any consultation. And then suddenly we have people disengaging or really getting quite outspoken. And we go, why are they responding this way? Because it could be for the need for autonomy has not been met. Or potentially it could be your need for relatedness is really, really high. So when I deliver this change, people might be thinking, am I going to be moving teams? Am I going to be working with different people? Will the team accept me? Will they like me? Will I feel that I belong there? And if that has not been met, I then start to see people disengaging from that process. Or lastly, it might be that your team has a very high need for fairness, or individuals have a high need for fairness. And potentially the way that need for change is communicated, they don't feel that there's transparency around that communication. They might feel there's a hidden agenda. They might feel that there's a hidden motivation behind this. Or they might be thinking, has that team got a better deal than me? Did that person get a better deal than me? Or have we all been treated equally here? And that's why we might see some people engaging with the process or not engaging with the process. So when you do your self-assessment, you'll see where your needs are on that ratio. And if you get your team to do it, you'll see where theirs are. And what a great thing to do is to actually get your team to do it and have a conversation and share it with everyone. So you'll see on the slide there that I've actually shared a little YouTube clip. Again, when you access the resources from IML, you will get those resources. It's a really beautiful visual demonstration of those 5 needs, and it will reinforce everything that I've said and give you an opportunity to revisit this model. I have to say this has been one of the most powerful and helpful models for me when it comes to communicating with people. And I'm really going to encourage you to use it before you have that conversation, thinking about what are their SCARF needs, how do I meet them. During the conversation, you might see people disengaging or getting really upset. So you would switch tacks during your conversation, or even after a conversation, you might go, holy moly, that went pear-shaped, that was really awful. And there's an opportunity to step back and go, where did I lose this person? Where did they get upset? Where did they start disengaging? I think that's where I lost them. That person obviously has a real high need for certainty. I need to go back and revisit that with them and give them some more reassurance around that. Alrighty, so we now are up to strategy number 5. Has your communication been understood the way I intended it to be understood? Remember, communication is common understanding. Have we understood the content, and have we understood the intention with which it needed to be delivered? Now, the big challenge here is we are really, really tempted to say to people, let me summarize what we've just discussed. Let me take you through an action plan of where we're going to go with this. Or to say things like, so are we on the same page here? Did you get it? Are you with me? And of course the response we get is, yep, all good, got it, or you're the boss, whatever. And we actually have no way of gauging how much the person has actually understood and how committed they are to what we've discussed and agreed upon. So what I'm going to suggest is that we need to ask ourselves, instead of telling, we need to be asking. So I'm going to really encourage you to say to yourself, instead of telling, ask. There's a brilliant quote from Socrates, the good old Greek philosopher. He said, I cannot teach you anything. I can only make you stop and think. So I'm going to say that again. I cannot teach you anything. I can only make you stop and think. So this is what I want to do here is, instead of just telling the person everything I've said, I want to ask them. So from your perspective, what are the key points we've just discussed and agreed on? just to confirm their understanding of the content and the action plan. If I want to gauge their level of commitment, and I might say, so how comfortable do you feel about what we've just discussed? How committed do you feel about what we've just agreed to? And if we're picking up from their nonverbals that there's a little bit of disengagement, we might say, hey, I'm getting a sense you're not entirely comfortable or maybe confident about what we've just discussed. Could you help me out here? What have I misunderstood? What have I potentially not communicated? And you might have to go right back to the beginning of the conversation. But far better that than saying something along the lines of, so did you understand? Have you got that? Really, really get it from them. So let's summarize all of this. Number one, what is my objective? So remember, this was, instead of just doing a dump, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I have to share, this is what we have to do. Stop, pause, take a deep breath. What do I want on the table by the end of this conversation? What do I want to happen? If I'm successful, what would it look like? If I'm successful, what will people be thinking differently? What will people be doing differently? How will I know I've been successful? And then ask yourself the question, will this strategy achieve that objective? If not, how do I change it? Number two, ask myself, does this actually really help them? What is their WIFM factor? Will they benefit from this conversation? Will this person walk away better off for this conversation or worse off? Will they see this conversation as helpful or harmful? Or it could be an email, or it could be a team meeting. Third, what language are you speaking? What communication style are you using? Are you speaking eagle language to a dove? So maybe I'm talking to a dove and saying, so bottom line results are, what I need from you is, the action plan is, and the dove is just desperately needing you to say, how are you traveling? How's your team going? What's morale like at the moment? The reason I'm asking is because we're under the pump at the moment and we really need to talk about how we're going to deliver on these deadlines. Can we talk about that? You're far more likely to get the dove to work with you if you talk dove language rather than eagle language if you're an eagle. Number four, what are their scarf needs? Is the person or the people I'm talking to, do they have a high need for status, meaning they need to feel significant and competent? Am I meeting that when I deliver this message? Do they have a high need for certainty? Am I then making sure we're talking about reassurances and predictability of outcomes or how we can support them? If it's autonomy, am I giving them an input for self-determination? Am I giving them choices and options? If it's relatedness, am I making them feel that they're included, that they belong? And if it's fairness, am I really making sure that I've shared the why, the motivation, the rationale behind what I'm discussing, making sure that I'm being absolutely transparent in my motivation and that there's fairness in what I'm doing, that I'm not giving one message to one person and another message to somebody else. And then last but not least, number five, have I actually achieved common understanding? What did they take away? What content did they take away? What is their level of commitment? Do they understand my intention? So please be so aware of those closed-ended questions at the end. Did you get that? So are we on the same page? So do you understand? So everything good with you? Rather, what is your understanding? How comfortable do you feel with this? What is your level of commitment around what we've discussed and agreed? I sense something's not working. Help me out here. Do we need to revisit anything? What do we need to revisit? So I'm really, really hoping that you've got some value out of what we've discussed today. Just to reiterate, it's a huge amount of information that we've shared with you in an extremely short space of time. if you contact IML and get the resources, you'll be able to do the SCARF self-assessment for yourself and your team. You can access the DISC profile through IML as well. Have a look at the 2 YouTube clips, the one on how to communicate with different birds. Have a look at the SCARF video clip, because that will really give you a good insight to that as well. And there's also a really good article on the SCARF needs, which is also included in the list of resources. And those will all be practical tools that you can not only download for yourself, but you can share with your teams as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. And Sam is going to join me so that we can take your questions for the next 5 to 7 minutes and answer as many as we can.
Thank you very much, Jackie, and terrific presentation as always. And I think I hope it's given people a real perspective on the way we try to run the Foundations program, and that it being very practical, and you obviously lean on your experience as well. So yeah. Thank you very much. Now, I've got a few questions here that have come through during the presentation. As Jackie said, please send any questions directly through, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. So from Chris, to what extent does communication include being culturally competent in ways that aren't just about written and spoken word?
Oh, okay. Repeat that for me, Sam.
To what extent does communication include being culturally competent in ways that aren't just about written and spoken word?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm sure you'll be absolutely familiar with the statistic around 93% of our message is actually non-verbal. So a lot of our non-verbals are going to be culturally influenced. And this is where I think if you've got people from different cultural backgrounds, it really helps to actually go and do a little bit of research around their non-verbals. I mean, there's simple things. Certain cultures find if you don't make eye contact with someone that's disrespectful and rude. In other cultures, it's actually really rude to make eye contact with someone who's senior to you. So it's really important, if you've got particular people in your team from a different cultural background, to actually go and research nonverbals so that you don't misunderstand some of those nonverbal practices as well. And also just understanding simple things like in certain cultures, they want to please, and so they will very often say yes, just because that's the polite thing to say, not necessarily it's because it's what they agree with. So that's a really valuable point. You would need to do some research around that and not make the assumption that your cultural understanding of how you communicate would be their cultural assumption as well. Yep, good.
In a group environment, Jackie, what is the best approach if you have a diverse range of DISC? I assume a diverse range of
birds.
Yeah, birds in your group.
Yeah, and I'm asked this really often. And it is a tricky one. I think the thing to do would be to research your audience and try and get an understanding of the predominant bird that will be in your audience, so you hit their WFM factor first. So if you've got mainly eagles in your audience, that you would be starting off with their language in terms of we're going to be addressing results and outcomes, and we really want to make sure we get some good impact here. But then you really do need to tap into each of those. So it's almost like when you're facilitating or training a session, you're aware of visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners. You're having to think, okay, the eagle wants to talk about bottom line results. So we'll say, look, here's the bottom line results. For people that want more detail, like our owls, here's some more information so the eagles know they can tune out and the owls can now tune in. This is the information they really want. And you can say, I am going to be talking about team morale or things that affect the team, so that our doves know, we are going to be covering that. And potentially, you've got your peacock sitting there saying, look, I want the big picture as well. So it's in your opening statement, in your opening agenda, that you clearly point out that you will be covering all 4 avenues, so that each bird goes, okay, they are going to cater for me.
With everyone so busy, how does the communication mode, email, meeting, phone calls, impact how effective you can be in following those concepts that you've explained?
Yeah, good question. So for most of us, probably email is the most predominant form of communication. And this is where it can be really challenging, having gone back on what I just said, that 93% of your communication is nonverbal. So let me say two things. First thing, I think you need to identify which are the most important relationships. Which relationships are going to actually have the biggest influence or impact on your ability to affect a result. So you can't possibly sit and work with every single one of these techniques for every single person in every single situation with every meeting, every email. It's just not feasibly possible. But identify the most important people that you know you need to have good relationships with and say, right, I have to put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this. And let's say it is an email. Now, I'm going to completely contradict what most email etiquette teaches. A lot of people talk about very concise, to the point email to keep it time effective. But if this relationship is really, really important and you know that it could be misconstrued, misunderstood because of lack of information, lack of nonverbals, lack of emotion, I'm going to suggest that in your email, you actually talk the language of that person. So you meet the SCARF needs in that email. You say, you have great experience in this field. I really would like to tap into that. I understand that you really need some processes and procedures around that, so I'm going to include that in my email. I'd love your input on this. So really make a point of meeting those SCARF needs in an email so that you're not triggering any threat responses in an email that you can't see the nonverbal response to.
Jackie, from Ruby, what are some good approaches to delivering bad news? We get this actually, we get a lot of this at the Institute. How, such as a performance review, how do you deliver bad news to someone and keep it in that positive light, I guess, in a way, or not diminish them?
Yep. So that's a great question. So let's go back to that strategy number 2. What's in it for them? What's important to them? So if you've got to go and talk to someone about potentially their poor performance or maybe a change that's going to affect them, you really want to try and have a handle on what their SCARF needs are. And that's why it's important to try and get people to do that self-assessment, or maybe through your experience of working with them, you start to figure out which SCARF need is more important to them. So if I want to go and talk to someone maybe around their poor performance, and let's say their SCARF need is status, which is they need to feel competent and significant, I would be saying something along the lines of, hey, Sam, I understand it's really important for you to be seen as competent in this team. And I understand that you work really, really hard to have that respect from your team members. Right now, I can see that some of these areas are a little bit challenging for you in your current role. And I want to talk to you about how we can actually support you and actually upskilling you or gaining the level of competence that you need so that you can maintain that credibility that's really important to you. So you do it in a way that you meet the SCARF need rather than just damaging that person's need for that particular need that they have.
How to communicate a feedback which a staff member doesn't want to hear? I guess that's a similar question than what we've just had.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's about what's in it for them. So, let's say their SCARF need is relatedness, and they're coming back from lunch late, or maybe they're not doing their full share of work. I would say, hey, Sam, look, I know that your relationship with your team members is really important to you. And I know that fairness is really, really important to you as well. I've noticed the last couple of days that you've been coming back from lunch a little bit late, and your team members have had to pick up a bit of the slack. And I know that you wouldn't want them to actually be taking up more work than is their fair share, because fairness is really important to you, and a good relationship with your teammates is really important to you. So let's talk about what you can do so that you can keep those good relationships, because I know those mean a lot to you. So you're talking about from what they want and what they need, rather than, hey, I need you to get back to work on time, because then it's all about me. When I talk about how it actually meets their need, they're more than likely to want to say, oh, this is a helpful conversation.
Speaking about on time, Jackie, there's a lot of questions here that we haven't answered. We will get back to you individually, as I said at the beginning, and answer those questions, as I said, from Jackie. So thank you so much, Jackie, for joining us. Just as a quick wrap, as Jackie said, resources that she's gone through, particularly the SCARF model and other things, are available at programs@managersandleaders.com.au. That's programs@managersandleaders.com.au. One of the things I failed to say at the beginning was that I didn't want you to spend the whole session writing down notes, because we've got them all for you. We can provide you with those slides. But I hope sometimes it is better in your notes, but we can certainly provide the slides and all the resources if you write to us there at programs@managersandleaders.com. Libby, Joe and the team will send you all of those resources. So just to wrap up quickly, in terms of our foundations roadmap and coming back to, I guess, Jackie's content today, I hope you can see the very practical approach we take to delivering this program. As I said, it's 12 weeks, 3 diagnostic tools, 6 face-to-face sessions, plus 12 months access to the LMS, 2 coaching sessions as part of it, both at the beginning and towards the end, to set people up on how they're going to develop their own skills, a mentor upon completion for 4 months, and a workplace project and presentation. I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to add, Jackie, in terms of your feel about, certainly probably that work, how you set people up on their journey.
Yep. And I think one thing I'd add to that is the feedback we've got from people that they've enjoyed most about the program was actually collaborating with people from different industries and different companies, and actually realizing they weren't alone and that other managers had similar challenges. And that was almost a bonus takeaway that often isn't even discussed, but is a huge benefit to everyone on the program.
Well, thank you very much again, Jackie. It's terrific content and some terrific insights there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam.
And as I said, programs@managersandleaders.com.au for those resources. And we look forward to seeing you certainly soon at the Institute. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.